Good morning. Good to have you with us. I'm Joe Fryer. Savannah is on assignment. We're going to start with those powerful storms sweeping across the eastern part of the country. This morning, more than 28 million people across the southeast and the mid-Atlantic are at risk for severe weather. The system has already left a destructive footprint. It's responsible for spawning tornadoes across the deep south, like this one caught on video in Mobile, Alabama. In Louisiana, tornadoes snapped power lines and ripped through homes and businesses. Dozens of people had to be rescued from an apartment complex in Slidell. And in Mississippi, officials say at least one person was killed in the storm, which is also causing widespread flooding all across the region. And there's more to come. Let's bring in NBC News meteorologist Angie Latzman. She's tracking these storms for us. Angie, good morning.
Good morning, Joe. It's another active day. We saw, of course, the damage from this storm system yesterday and all of the reports of tornadoes and such. Today, we're watching for more of that heavy rain stretched across much of the eastern third of the country. And we have, like you said, that potential for some of those stronger storms. Right now, the flood watch is coming in at 7 million, but we do have some of these flash flood warnings that have been ongoing across parts of the Florida Panhandle and into southern Georgia all morning long. You can see just how heavy that rain is across that region. We've got rain across the Ohio Valley stretching into parts of the south. That's going to work through the Great Lakes, the Northeast, New England here as we get through the day today. Let's time out this system. There it is. You can see what a mess it is when it comes to the heavy rain. And on top of that, those, of course, strong storms. But as we go through even your evening hours, folks in places like New York City, down through parts of the Appalachians, you'll see that wet weather sticking around for the afternoon commute, not to mention some of the stronger storms that will develop from basically Illinois all the way down to Florida will have that potential. By tomorrow, if you're waiting for this system to leave, well, we're still going to be seeing some lingering effects tomorrow. Some of those wraparound showers around the system. We'll see some of that cooler air working in, and it'll be noticeably blustery for folks across that region, too. Here's the severe threat, 28 million people at risk. The difference between today and yesterday is the threat of tornadoes yesterday was expansive, and that's what we were looking at to be the most probable impact that you would see from that storm system. Today, it looks like the strongest impacts will be those wind gusts, 60 miles per hour or higher, and much of that focused across parts of the Ohio Valley and the southeast. We're going to see that last into at least the evening hours for us tonight. Now, windy conditions are also out there. We've got 42 million people under wind alerts, and it's mainly across the southeast, stretched along the Gulf Coast. Fort Myers, Orlando, Atlanta, Memphis, Shreveport, all included in that, with wind gusts anywhere from 30 to 40, even close to 50 miles per hour. As far north as places like Buffalo and Detroit, you'll be well into the 40 mile per hour range through at least today and potentially even into tomorrow. On top of that, as if we needed another thing to worry about, we know how much rain was impacting folks across parts of the south yesterday. They received a month's worth of rain in a day in some spots. So the flash flood risk, marginal to slight across parts of the mid-Atlantic and the Northeast and even close to the Great Lakes today. We're expecting anywhere from 1 to 3 inches of rain in some of these spots that will receive those higher amounts, so the flooding concern will remain. Reminder not to drive through those flooded roadways.
A good reminder there. Another busy day beyond into tomorrow. Thank you so much, Angie. Appreciate it. That controversial decision by the Arizona Supreme Court is having political and legal effects all across the country. Former President Trump is now weighing in on the ruling, which brings back a Civil War-era abortion law. He says it goes too far. NBC News correspondent Dana Griffin has the latest from Arizona.
Former President Trump distancing himself from that bombshell Arizona ruling on abortion.
Did Arizona go too far? Yeah, they did, and that'll be straightened out. And I'm sure that the governor and everybody else are going to bring it back into reason.
The former president criticizing Arizona's revival of the Civil War-era ban, adding he won't sign a national ban. And controversial Republican Arizona Senate candidate Carrie Lake endorsed the 1864 law 2 years ago.
We have a great law in the books. We will be a state where we will not be taking the lives of our unborn anymore.
Now saying she opposes it, adding Arizona voters will make the decision on the ballot come November, when an initiative to protect abortion rights will likely be on the ballot. Many Arizona voters differing on abortion stances, but against the total ban.
I'm a Christian, but I still believe in the women's right to choose.
I'm not for abortion, but I think it's not the place of the state to punish women.
President Biden also addressing the ruling.
What do you say to the people of Arizona right now who are witnessing a law go in place that dates back to the Civil War era?
Elect me. I'm in the 20th century. 21st century. not back then. They weren't even a state.
Kathy Herod leads the Center for Arizona Policy, which opposes abortion rights.
Arizona can be the first in the nation to defeat a radical pro-abortion amendment. It simply goes too far for Arizona voters.
Meanwhile, groups like Arizona Abortion Access are working to protect women's right to choose.
After the decision came down yesterday, we decided that we just need to get out and be in as many places as we can be.
You just signed that, and I see tears in your eyes.
Yes.
Why?
Because I've been in a situation, and I'm lucky to be alive. And you want to have children, and when you find out you can't, and you're in danger, your health is in danger. And I can't imagine the women that are going to be in situations that can't get the care they need.
We spoke to voters on both sides. They're galvanized, just like what we saw when Roe v. Wade was overturned. One voter telling me she wants to amend the state constitution not to reflect 1864, but 2024. Back to you.
All right, Dana, thank you so much. Let's talk more about the political shockwaves coming out of Arizona with NBC News senior national politics reporter Jonathan Allen. John, good morning. Let's begin with former President Trump, his remarks, which we just heard in Dana's piece. I want to listen to another portion, and we'll talk about it on the other side.
So for 52 years, people have wanted to end Roe v. Wade to get it back to the states. We did that. It was an incredible thing, an incredible achievement. We did that, and now the states have it, and the states are putting out what they want. It's the will of the people.
So, John, Trump also now saying he would not sign a national abortion ban if he's elected president again. That's reversing positions he took during his first presidency. So is this candidate Trump recognizing this issue of abortion is a big threat to him winning the White House?
Yeah, if you don't like what President Trump has said most recently about abortion, just wait. Because what we've seen over the course of time is he has changed his position over and over again. You go back to 1999, he said he was very pro-choice. Then he bragged about killing Roe by appointing Supreme Court justices who were against Roe versus Wade. He said at one point that women should be punished for having abortions, and now he says it should be left to the states. I think, yes, this is a danger to him electorally. It's the reason that he came out with a position that reverses what he said before. He used to be in favor of a national ban. Now he's against it. He's trying to find a safe place politically on an issue that divides Republicans. It used to unite them. Most Republicans wanted Roe to be overturned, but then once it was overturned, they didn't have a plan for what they were going to do with these state laws, whether they're the new state laws like Florida with its 6-week ban or the ones that date back to the Civil War before we would have been able to talk on television or streaming.
Yeah, much less or anything else. So, I mean, let's talk about that lack of unity. We have seen some of Trump's biggest supporters, like Senator Lindsey Graham, even the former Vice President Mike Pence, now publicly criticize Trump's new stance on abortion. Normally, we see Republicans follow his lead. Abortion seems to be a different issue. Why is it we're seeing this pushback among some of his allies with the election just months away?
Yeah, I think a part of it is that some of those allies, and particularly you look at Lindsey Graham, they're trying to find a place on abortion where they can basically get the law to say that most abortions are illegal, and at the same time not lose elections for the presidency, the Senate, and the House. And they have decided that this sort of weeks-based ban, meaning 15 or 16 weeks at the national level with some exceptions if the woman's life is in danger or in cases of rape or incest, they've decided that that's like politically the best they're going to be able to do. It appears to me that Donald Trump disagrees with them. And often when Donald Trump disagrees with what comes out of Republicans in Washington, he's right, but not always.
John, real quickly, what is it we are hearing from Republicans within the state of Arizona who are likely running for office this year, knowing abortion could be on the ballot?
They're running away as fast as they possibly can from this. So you saw, Carrie Lake there. She's completely flipped on this as she runs for a Senate seat in Arizona. Most of the Republicans in Arizona, even if they agree with the 1864 law, even if they agree that people who are involved in abortion should be punished with prison time, they understand that the politics of that are destructive to them, even in a state that has had that law on the books since it was actually a territory. So, I think they're going to continue to struggle with it until that 1864 law is repealed and something else is in place. And even then, they may struggle with it.
All right.
This is an issue where there's a relatively silent majority. The numbers are pretty clear. Most Americans don't want to see abortion banned.
Which is why so many Democrats want to get it on the ballot here in November. All right, John, thanks as always for your reporting. Appreciate it. Another fight over abortion rights is also playing out in Iowa today. That state Supreme Court is set to hear arguments on whether the so-called fetal heartbeat law should go into effect. That law bans abortion at 6 weeks before many women do know they're pregnant. It provides exceptions for rape, incest, fetal abnormalities, or when the mother's life is at risk. The law was passed and signed into law last summer, but a district judge temporarily blocked it before it could go into effect, allowing for courts to hear legal challenges. Iowa's Attorney General is appealing the lower court order defending this new law. NBC News Now legal analyst Angela Senadella joins us now to break down the case. Angela, good morning. So we should point out this challenge, while it's playing out in the courts, abortion does remain legal in Iowa until the 20th week of pregnancy. But walk us through this case and the key arguments we're expecting.
Sure. So the state here is saying that once Roe v. Wade was overturned, then the right to determine what an abortion law should be was kicked back to the states. And here both the legislature and also the governor have passed this law, signed it into law, and so they believe this is the will of the Iowa people. Now, on the flip side, though, we have the other side holding on to this hope of really Iowa judicial precedent. So when Roe v. Wade was overturned at the national level, the U.S. Supreme Court reversed their own position nationally with regards to case law, allowing abortion to be protected as a right to privacy. Now, at the same time, though, that Roe v. Wade governed as law of the land, state Supreme Courts, like in Iowa, had made similar decisions, interpreting their own constitutions to also apply this high, rigorous legal standard to any challenges to abortion. Now, that was never specifically reversed. So this is really a procedural debate where the opposition is trying to say because that was not reversed in the state of Iowa, that is still precedent. So we should still look at these new laws with a high level of challenge.
So last year, Iowa's Supreme Court deadlocked on a previous version of the 6-week abortion ban, which is why we still don't see a ban in that state right now. Is this different? What's different about this case?
Joe, they're actually almost exactly identical. So what happened was this new law was passed because the other one was deadlocked, because the other one wasn't pushed forward. And it really just shows you how powerfully and strong the people of Iowa, in terms of the legislature and their officials, want to push this through. So the law is the same. The difference is just that because it is a new law, it can be re-challenged.
If Iowa Supreme Court says, yes, we're going to let this 6-week ban go into effect for those who are abortion rights supporters, do they have any other options at this point, or is this a done deal?
So in the state of Iowa, it's very difficult. We've seen other states, like in Florida, the ability for voters to go possibly choose directly by putting a ballot measure at the election and being able to vote themselves. But Iowa restricts that because their state constitution requires the state legislature to approve any language. So it's unlikely that they would do that, given that they already passed this bill. So at this point, if the Supreme Court of Iowa does not stop this, it is likely there's very limited recourse.
Very interesting. And a reminder, every state is always totally different.
Exactly
all right.
right.
Angela Senadella, as always, thank you so much. Turning now to the Israel-Hamas war, military officials confirmed the 3 sons of Hamas's top political leader were killed by an airstrike in Gaza yesterday. That leader's name, Ismail Haniyeh. He's now accusing Israel of carrying out the strike in the spirit of revenge and murder. Israeli forces say the 3 brothers conducted militant activity in central Gaza, but did not elaborate on what that activity was. Now, it's unclear if the airstrike will complicate the already delicate negotiations between Israel and Hamas. Move comes as the White House continues to pressure Prime Minister Netanyahu to call for a ceasefire. President Biden recently said he does not agree with Netanyahu's approach and urged Israel to allow more humanitarian aid into Gaza. NBC News White House correspondent Ali Rafa joins us now with the latest. Ali, good morning. So earlier this week, we heard President Biden intensify his criticism against Netanyahu over his conduct in this war. But when it comes to this threat posed by Iran, he's offering Israel his full support. Let's take a listen to this comment from the Rose Garden yesterday.
They're threatening to launch a significant attack on Israel. As I told Prime Minister Netanyahu, our commitment to Israel's security against these threats from Iran and its proxies is ironclad. Let me say it again, ironclad. We're going to do all we can to protect Israel's security.
So, Ali, how is the U.S. preparing for a potential Iranian attack on Israel? Is the U.S. attempting negotiations here to cool down the possibility of any sort of proxy war?
Yeah, Joe, good morning. Well, the White House's main goal here is de-escalation. And with this threat from Iran coming against the backdrop, especially of those rising tensions, especially out in the public between President Biden and Prime Minister Netanyahu, President Biden sought to dispel any thinking that there is any rift or break in the alliance between the U.S. and Israel yesterday. He said at that press conference he held alongside the Japanese Prime Minister that Israel, the U.S. support behind Israel is, quote, ironclad. He said the U.S. is doing all it can also to protect Israel's security. And if you'll remember, ever since the Israel-Hamas war began 6 months ago, Israel has been in these tit-for-tat fights with Iranian proxy groups like Hezbollah and the Houthis. And it's still unclear how Iran could initiate this retaliation, whether it could take action independently or whether it could use those proxy groups. But the White House is saying that it's closely monitoring any reports or any public statements coming out of Iran. But at the end of the day, the White House no doubt sees any escalatory retaliation by Iran directly inside Israel as a major escalation in this war, Jeff.
A reminder of just how complicated the situation is. You have the Iran situation, but then you have what's happening in Gaza. The president also said yesterday he's been very blunt with Netanyahu about the need to send more humanitarian aid into Gaza. How is Israel responding? Are we seeing more aid getting into the Gaza Strip?
Yeah, well, White House officials even say that the president's frustration with Prime Minister Netanyahu has reached a peak in recent weeks. And you'll remember that phone call, that very tense, high-stakes phone call the two shared last week, where the president really set down actionables that he needed to see from Israel to not only protect more civilian life in Gaza, but also to get more humanitarian aid into Gaza. The president telling Prime Minister Netanyahu that if he didn't see those actionables, that the U.S. policy towards Israel would change. And the president yesterday in that press conference suggested that he hadn't seen the full results of those actions from Israel yet. He said he wasn't satisfied with what has been done so far. We do know, though, that some progress has been made, with the U.S. officials saying that more than 1,000 trucks full of humanitarian aid have entered Gaza over the last 3 days. And that's the highest amount that has gone in since the war started 6 months ago. The State Department says that Secretary of State Antony Blinken spoke with the Israeli defense minister about this yesterday, saying in a statement, quote, that Blinken welcomed Israel's recent announcements of urgent steps to facilitate the entry of humanitarian assistance into Gaza and to improve humanitarian deconfliction and coordination, reiterating that incidents such as the strike on World Central Kitchen workers must never reoccur. Still, though, Joe, the White House is waiting for Israel to open another border crossing at Erez, as well as another port to carry more humanitarian aid into Gaza. The White House saying they want to see that happen in the next coming days. Joe.
Allie, while we have you and while we're talking about the White House, let's talk about the U.S. economy. President Biden addressed that latest consumer price index report, showed that unexpected rise in inflation, 3.5% year over year. Voters already give him low approval marks when it comes to this issue. So what's he saying now? How is this impacting his messaging for his reelection campaign?
Yeah, the economy is one issue the president has really struggled with over the last year or so as he runs for re-election. He's even told his aides that he is frustrated by how his economic message hasn't been able to really resonate with voters. Still, though, yesterday, he said that he still stands by his prediction that by the end of the year, the Fed would slash interest rates. Take a listen to what he said.
We have dramatically reduced inflation. We're better situated than we were when we took office, where inflation was skyrocketing, and we have a plan to deal with it.
The president taking credit for what has been done so far to cut inflation, but he also admitted that there is still a lot of work left to be done, Joe.
All right, Allie Raff, a lot to cover this morning. Thank you so much. From the White House to Capitol Hill, a bipartisan group of lawmakers is focusing on anti-Semitism. They've introduced new legislation to address the rising number of hateful incidents we've seen since the war between Israel and Hamas began last October. Data from the Anti-Defamation League shows that anti-Semitic instances in the U.S. reached reached a record high last year. NBC News congressional correspondent Julie Sirkin joins us now to break down this bill. Julie, let's start with why this bill is being introduced. How much has anti-Semitism risen in the U.S. over these past 6 months, and what are we hearing from leaders in the community?
Well, according to the Pew Research Center, in a new poll they released earlier this month, Joe, 9 in 10 American Jews feel like anti-Semitism is at its highest ever. This is, of course, in the 6 months since the October 7th Hamas attack on Israel, the Israeli invasion of Gaza that happened afterward. They really feel unsafe. They feel like heightened threats are being logged at them. A lot of Jews also are hiding their identity publicly, not wearing the Magen David, the Star of David necklaces that they would traditionally wear to display their Jewish heritage. I spoke to former Congressman Ted Deutsch. Take a listen to what he had to say. Remember, he's the president now of the American Jewish Committee. Watch.
This is a moment of enormous challenge for the Jewish community, and there's great fear in the Jewish community. And it's no longer anecdotal. This used to be something that we talked about. We felt it. But the data now confirms what we all already know, that what used to be a simmering flame has now become a 5-alarm emergency. Anti-Semitism is at an all-time high. Jewish Americans are scared.
So this is obviously happening all over the United States, where American Jews are feeling like they are at risk. And this bill, bipartisan bill, aims to address some of that.
Yeah, so let's talk about what's in the bill to try and address the problem.
Yeah, exactly, Joe. So the bill essentially would create a position, an advisor of sorts to the president. This doesn't just end with the Biden administration. This would be really long term. It would be a special advisor, somebody who's solely focused on the problem of anti-Semitism and how to counter it. You see some of what it does on your screen here. This individual would advise the president. He would also implement a plan. Remember, the administration released a historic 100-step plan last May before the war. Something like that is what this individual would focus on implementing across agencies. You see some of those points as well include demanding that FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Service, invest support in non-private security options. That's for worship centers, for community centers as well. It also would make May the official Jewish American Heritage Month to try and culminate some of these problems that we're seeing. So this bill, of course, would do a lot. It also, I should mention, is led by Jackie Rosen, who's one of the first Jewish women ever to serve in the Senate, Joe.
Julie, while we have you, let's change gears here. House Speaker Mike Johnson is expected to travel to Mar-a-Lago on Friday to visit Trump for what he's calling remarks on election integrity. What more can you tell us about that?
Well, look, they're keeping the details close to their vest. I even tried to ask Johnson about this yesterday. He said, we'll see. I'm very excited to travel down there to Mar-a-Lago. But you'll remember the political situation that Johnson finds himself in. Marjorie Taylor Greene, for example, a hardline Republican who is a big ally of the former president. She's currently holding a motion to vacate Johnson over his head. So perhaps he's doing this in a way to extend an olive branch to that faction of the party to show them, hey, listen, I'm still really close with the former president. I'm doing exactly what he and what the Republican Party wants me to do. But in terms of the topic here, it is on election integrity. It's not clear what the two are going to announce, whether it's some new policy or some new legislative effort that they're going to try to take on together. Remember, Johnson was one of the architects of that amicus brief that he signed, that he led in the House on behalf of former President Trump, demanding that the 2020 election results be counted again, be overturned. So he was really involved in that effort. So I'm curious to see what he says with the former president on stage tomorrow.
All right, we'll see what happens. Julie Sirkin, thank you so much. Next week, former President Donald Trump will become the first former U.S. president to face a criminal trial. The case here in New York involves hush money allegedly paid to adult film star Stormy Daniels before the 2016 election. But with so many cases swirling around the former president, it can be hard to keep them all straight. So this morning, we are joined by NBC News national correspondent Yasmin Vasugian to help us break down how we got here. Yasmin, good morning.
Good morning, Joe. Despite all of Donald Trump's efforts to delay this trial, it is beginning on Monday morning. Will likely go on for 4 to 6 weeks. But we want to remind folks that this dates all the way back to the 2016 election and the release of that Access Hollywood tape. Take a look.
On August 21st, 2018, Michael Cohen, Donald Trump's former fixer, pled guilty to 8 counts in Manhattan federal court. Cohen alleged in a court of law Donald Trump directed him to make illegal payments to influence the 2016 election.
He worked to pay money to silence 2 women who had information that he believed would be detrimental to the 2016 campaign.
Those 2 women, adult film star Stormy Daniels and Playboy playmate Karen McDougal, were at the center of hush money payments by Michael Cohen ahead of the 2016 election.
Women, and even more women like me, matter.
Cohen paid $130,000 to Stormy Daniels, and Karen McDougal got $150,000 from the National Enquirer. A deal Trump's fixer Cohen said he orchestrated himself on behalf of Donald Trump and the Trump Organization. Donald Trump and the organization deny those allegations.
Do you know about the $130,000 payment to Stormy Daniels?
Manhattan District Attorney Cy Vance began investigating those payments. He eventually subpoenaed 8 years of Trump's tax returns. The fight went all the way to the Supreme Court before Cy Vance got the documents in 2021.
The Manhattan District Attorney now is in possession of former President Donald Trump's tax returns.
And the next month, prosecutors turned their sights on Alan Weisselberg, the Trump Organization's CFO.
And this guy is the ultimate service provider. He has been working for the Trump family for decades. If you crack these service providers, you can crack the case.
And when Weisselberg refused to testify against the former president, prosecutors announced charges against the Trump Organization and the CFO. They both plead not guilty.
15 counts for a range of charges, from larceny to tax evasion to falsifying records. It shows the DA here, Cy Vance, meant business during this multi-year probe.
In January of 2022, a new Manhattan DA, Alvin Bragg, is sworn in with speculation over whether he will pursue charges. But on April 7th, 2022, he releases a statement saying in part the investigation continues. In August of 2022, Alan Weisselberg pleads guilty and agrees to testify against the Trump Organization. And 4 months later, the Trump Organization is convicted, found guilty of tax fraud, and eventually Alvin Bragg calls a new grand jury.
We finally got answers on the political, financial, legal, moral, public corruption scandal.
And in March of 2023, Trump posts on Truth Social of an imminent arrest.
Thank you.
And while the arrest on that day did not happen, on March 30th, 2023, Mr. Trump was indicted on 34 counts. Days later, in a Manhattan courthouse, he was arraigned. He's pled not guilty.
Charging a former president of the United States for the first time in history on a basis that every single pundit and legal analyst said there is no case. There's no case.
3 separate times, Joe, just in the last couple of days or so, the former president and his attorneys have tried to delay this trial, and every single time, especially last night in the appellate court, they denied those motions that were filed to delay. So it looks as if, as of today, and I'll believe it when I see it come Monday, this trial is going forward 4 to 6 weeks. They'll be off on Wednesdays, likely off for Passover as well. Star witnesses there, 2 of the folks that were mentioned in that piece, Michael Cohen, Stormy Daniels. I think the big overarching question is, will Michael Cohen be a star witness for the jury? Will they find him believable? All of that will unfold starting Monday.
4 days away.
4 days away.
See what happens.
We're
All right,
getting ready.
Yasmin, thanks for breaking it down. We appreciate it.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.